Precious seconds count in a life or death situation.
So what if we told you if an emergency hit you or your family, your next ride to the hospital could be inside an ambulance with nearly 500,000 miles on it? That's hard to believe, but a CBS 5 investigation found it's happening. Investigative reporter Tammy Leitner joins us.
That's right, Kent. We are talking about Southwest Ambulance, the main provider throughout the state. Now, we spent months going through their response times, reviewing service records, talking to medics within the company, firefighters who work alongside them, and finally, asking the tough questions to Southwest administrators. The answers we got may surprise you.
I got weaker and weaker, and I started to sweat profusely.
Richard Henley had no idea why his body was failing him.
I didn't pass out completely.
When surprise firefighters arrived, they found the 78-year-old struggling.
He needed to get into the hospital. He needed some help.
What he needed, firefighters knew, was an ambulance.
Right about 13, 14 minutes into the call, I still hadn't gotten a response from an ambulance yet. So I had called back to the alarm room, asked them to check on what my ETA for the ambulance was. They told me they'd get right back to me. Probably another minute to 2 minutes after that, they responded back stating that Southwest hadn't dispatched an ambulance yet.
That's when Captain Jerry Clark decided he was done waiting. He took Henley to the hospital, not by ambulance, but by fire truck.
Do they teach you that, hey, someday you may have to transport a patient in the engine?
No, they don't teach you that, but what they do teach is to use all tools that you have.
We will never know if that ride in the fire truck saved Henley's life. But it does raise questions about the Southwest ambulance that never showed. During our 5-month investigation into this privately owned ambulance provider that services most of the valley, we uncovered ambulances in various states of disrepair, with expired supplies, medics pushed to the limit, and troubling response times that could ultimately affect you.
We started hearing complaints from some of our crew members that they were having long extended response times.
Surprise Fire Chief Michael White noticed a problem with Southwest's response times more than a year ago.
You guys are in the business of saving lives. Is a 15-minute ambulance response time or even 20 minutes acceptable?
No, it's not.
Our investigative unit went through thousands of emergency transport calls in the West Valley for a 6-month period. The state requires providers to respond in less than 10 minutes, 90% of the time. But when the clock starts is up for dispute. Southwest times from the moment their dispatch gets the call. By its own calculations, Southwest only hits that 10-minute mark in surprise 77% of the time. But the fire department has tougher standards, saying the clock starts when the call comes in. In that case, Southwest meets requirements in surprise only 51% of the time, taking as long as 20, 30, even 40 minutes and longer on some of the calls.
I've been doing this a long time, yeah, it gets frustrating.
This Southwest medic tells us crews now sit on street corners across the West Valley to wait for calls, just to lower response times. And that's exactly what we found in Surprise, Glendale, and Peoria. The result? Response times are about a minute shorter, but at what cost?
It has affected medics. I know one guy who's passed out, whose blood pressure went down. Myself have been felt very nauseated by the end of the day, just drinking literally a gallon of water throughout the day, just trying to stay hydrated.
Are you aware that one of your medics needed medical treatment after sitting in an ambulance with a broken air conditioning unit on a street corner for hours?
I'm not aware of the incident of the air conditioner being broken.
I would think as the president of this company, if you had a medic that was taken to the hospital, you would want to look into exactly why that happened. Was the air conditioning broken? Was the truck not working properly?
Yes, I do see your point on that. I do know that we have investigated the incident. I don't have that specific outcome.
Our investigation uncovered more than half of Southwest ambulances are either broken, missing life-saving equipment, or have expired supplies. The president of Southwest, Jeff Sargent, says if an ambulance goes down, the rig is repaired here at their fleet center right away. But industry insiders tell us that's not the case.
Would you buy a personal vehicle with 500,000 miles on it to take your sick family member to the hospital? No.
We went through the maintenance records on 170 Southwest ambulances inspected this year. We found 69 of those ambulances have more than 300,000 miles on them. 10 of those have more than 400,000 miles.
And that's not cruising miles on the freeway. That's jamming it to the floor to drive code 3 to somebody who's dying, stomping on the brakes, jamming it to the floor, moving in and out of traffic. Those are hard, beat up miles.
But the president of the company told us there's nothing wrong with that.
That is not an unusual situation around the country for ambulances.
So we checked further into those maintenance records and found ambulances on the road with broken emergency lights, sirens that don't work, and non-functioning horns. CBS 5 Investigates also discovered not all of the ambulances had the proper life-saving equipment. Some were missing oxygen tanks, others backboards. We found ambulances also stocked with expired medical supplies, like IVs, breathing tubes, and blood glucose testing kits. Then there are the expired drug boxes, one dating back to 2006. And as for the way the medications are stored in the rigs,
We brought a thermometer in one day and left it in the back of the ambulance during the hottest part of the day with the air conditioner running, and it was 102 degrees.
this video shot by a medic in a Southwest ambulance shows many of the medications should be stored at room temperature. A far cry from 102 degrees.
If we're storing medications outside of a range, it could affect its effectiveness, yes, and that would be concerning.
But what about Richard Henley's concerns? An ambulance that was supposed to save his life never showed.
Are you aware that a patient was transported to the hospital on a fire truck because your medics were taking too long to arrive to the scene?
I'm not aware of that circumstance.
Nobody told you about that?
Yeah, and I'm not aware of that circumstance. If you give me the specifics, I'll be more than happy to look into it for you.
Sure.
Because that's not acceptable.
That's a big deal, isn't it?
Absolutely. It's absolutely something that should have been brought to my level.
The Department of Health here licenses ambulance providers, but during our investigation, we discovered they only check the response times every 3 years. In fact, they had no idea that Southwest was not meeting their response times in Surprise until we brought it to their attention. The Department of Health has agreed to review their policies because of our investigation.
And let's go back to that patient who was transported on a fire truck. Was that incident ever investigated by Southwest?
It was, and they are admitting that their dispatcher made a mistake that day. She was disciplined, and she actually has been fired since then for something completely unrelated.
All right. Good report. Yeah.
Thanks, Tammy.